All right, 4.5. So in 4.5, we're going to continue with what we were doing in 4.4. So we're still going to be factoring here, but now we're going to be solving. So we're solving quadratic equations. So the zero of a function, we're going to factor into two parentheses, just like we did. This is equal to 0. If this parenthesis, so this first set, if this is equal to 0, and let's say the second one, it could be 1,000,000 or 1,000. What's 0 times 1,000? 0. The same thing happens if we have the second one. If this one's 1,000, it doesn't matter what number, and this one's 0. What's 1,000 times 0? 0. So the point of this is that when we factor, we can set each parenthesis equal to 0, and that'll give us an answer. So when we factor, we just break it up, set them equal to 0, and solve. So it's like a couple more steps just to solve. But we're continuing with factoring. So just like we did before, we need to find 2 factors of 6 to add to -5.
1 times our negative
1 and 6.
What's -1 times 6? -6, so that doesn't work.
Oh, no. 1 is -6.
What's 1 times -6?
Never mind.
-3 and -2.
Awesome, -3 and -2. Because that multiplies to +6 and adds to -5. So what goes into our parentheses? X minus 3 and x minus 2. So this is the same thing we were doing in 4.4, but we have this little guy here, equals 0. So it just tells us that we have to solve. So to solve, I can break it up. So every parenthesis gets set equal to 0. So x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 2 equals 0. So now I have 2 little equations here, and I just solve for x. In my first equation, how do I solve for x? Awesome, add 3 to both sides. So x is equal to what? 3. So that's one answer. I do the same thing for the second equation. How do I solve for x in the second one? Add 2. So x is equal to 2. So that's my second answer. So we have 2 answers here. One thing that we need to do, make sure before we factor, is that we have to get all of these to be equal to 0. So the last one already started equal to 0, so we didn't have to do anything to start. But here, how can I get this to be equal to 0? Awesome. Add 12 to both sides. So I'm going to move that 12 over. So I have x squared minus 7x equals 12. Oh, oops, plus 12 equals 0. So I added 12 to move it to the other side. We have to have it be equal to 0 before we start. So that's always the first thing you want to do. Make sure it's equal to 0. What do I do next? What are 2 factors of 12 that add to -7? -4 and -3. Perfect. So what goes into my parentheses? X minus 4 and x minus 3 equals 0. And then what should I do next? Split it up and solve. So x minus 4 equals 0, and x minus 3 equals 0. So how can I solve my first equation? Add 4 to both sides, so what does x equal? X equals 4. And what do I do in my second equation? Add 3 to both sides. So x equals 3. So these are my 2 answers. All right, example 3. First thing we need to do is make sure that it's equal to 0. So it's already equal to 0. So then we can just factor from here. What are two factors of negative 24 that add to 2? Awesome. 6 and negative 4. So what goes into our parentheses? X plus 6 and x minus 4. What do I do next? Split it apart. So x plus 6 is equal to 0, and x minus 4 is equal to 0. What do I do next? Subtract 6 on both sides. So x is equal to what? Negative 6. Perfect. And then in the second one, I'm going to add 4. So what's x equal to? 4. So there's my two answers. All right, example 4. What do we know about x squared and 9? What type of numbers are these? Perfect squares. So how can I factor perfect squares? What times what gives me x squared? X times x. And what times what gives me 9? 3 times 3. So I have two parentheses. What goes into my parentheses? X plus 3 and x minus 3. Awesome. Another way you could think about it is, what are two factors of negative 9 that add to 0? Because here we don't have an x in the middle, so it'd just be 0. So what are two factors of negative 9 that add to 0? It'd be positive 3 and negative 3. What do I do next? Split it. So x plus 3 equals 0. X minus 3 equals 0. In the first one, how do I solve for x? Subtract 3 on both sides. So x is equal to? Negative 3. And in the second one, what do I do? Add 3 to both sides. So x is equal to? 3. So those are my two answers.
36.
Awesome. I have to get it to be equal to 0, so I need to add 36 to both sides. So I have x squared plus 13x plus 36 equals 0. Sienna, what are two factors of 36 that add to 13? Sienna L. Lucas.
9 and 4.
Awesome. 9 and 4. Lucas helped you out. Sienna, what's going to go into the parentheses?
X plus 9 and x plus 4.
Awesome. X plus 9 and x plus 4. Leah, what do I do next from here?
Do x plus 9 equals 0. And x plus 4 equals 0.
Perfect. Rioni, what should I do next?
Subtract 9.
Subtract 9. So remember, we want to get x all by itself. So move the 9 over. So I have to subtract 9. So x is equal to? Negative 9. Julia, what should I do in my second equation? Subtract 4. Perfect. So Julia, what's x equal to? Negative 4. Awesome. So those are my two answers. Yeah, if you wanted to, you could write your answer as x is equal to negative 9 and negative 4 like this. So you don't have to write the x equals twice, but either way works.